Okay, I appreciate everyone arriving on time so we can start on time. I don't want to keep you waiting too much longer. The good news is we are live streaming tonight's event. We are also video archiving it, so for members of the community who weren't able to join us tonight, they'll be able to view the presentation as well as early as tomorrow morning just by going to the district website. We've really established a nice protocol of having these meetings videotaped, streamed, and we're noticing that shortly after we hold them, it gets a significant number of views. So although we probably have a few less people in the room than we anticipated, we've learned that post our meetings, many people do view the video. So welcome to those who will be doing that tomorrow. Thank you very much for attending. If you would, please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. For those of you who I have not had the pleasure of making your acquaintance, my name is Ken Boston, I'm Superintendent of Schools. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us tonight for an important discussion. Several members of our board were able to join us tonight, so I thank Mrs. Weiss, Mrs. Freed, Mrs. Mamalito, and Mr. Tomeo for their time in joining us tonight. We have some of our district administration here as well this evening, our Assistant Superintendent for Business, Mrs. Laughlin, our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum, Mrs. Hull, our Director of Transportation and Technology, Mr. Tranquino, and our Director of Health, Physical Education, and Athletics, Mr. Shanahan. So thank you all for being here as well. A lot of the work that's been done to get to us with this point has been in conjunction with our district architects and engineers from the firm BBS, and tonight we're joined by Carolisa Grunder and Fran Siba from BBS, so thank you also for being here as well. And if there are questions, they are here to answer them. And of course, we have our Director of Facilities, Mr. McDonald, who has been an integral part of this study that helps us prepare for this presentation. So Mr. McDonald, welcome to you as well. Tonight is about starting the process of talking about a capital bond. And I want to say right away at the beginning, there have been no definitive decisions made. We're in the evaluation stage, we're in the discussion stage. But I thought it was important tonight to invite as many members of the community as possible to hear where we are to this point and start to gain your insight and your input on what directions you may like to see the district take in this initiative. I think by now you're all familiar with, when I started in the district, I developed a 100-day plan. And part of that 100-day plan was really evaluating a lot of the systems that we have in place, from curriculum to policy to facilities. And throughout that evaluation, I have to tell you, I've been very impressed with a great deal that's going on in this district as far as curriculum development, as far as instruction, leadership, so many outstanding members of our faculty and staff. One area where I do have concerns is facilities. It is not the fault of any previous leadership that we have the needs that we do as far as our facilities, our buildings, and our grounds. Right now, we're working within regulation in the state that really prevents districts from making needed repairs, making needed enhancements to buildings and grounds without entertaining things like a capital bond. You're all familiar with the tax levy cap. And what the tax levy cap does is it limits the amount of money we can request from the community to support different initiatives we identify as priorities. When the high school needs a new roof, that's clearly a priority. But because that is $1 million plus expense, for us to try to include that in a district budget, it would have to be at the expense of something else. We would have to remove $1 million worth of expenses to the high school in order to add the new roof. Where does money come from in the district budget? It's programs and staff. And I can't in good conscience recommend as the superintendent that we eliminate half of our math department so the roof can be replaced. And you'll notice that many districts are in the very same position, which is why so many of our neighbors have been talking about capital bonds. A lot of the school buildings in this area were built during a similar time period. Things are becoming in need of repair at similar paces. And even our closest neighbors in Northport, East Northport, just had a successful bond passed overwhelmingly in our community, targeting many of the same things you'll hear us discussing tonight. But each community is unique, and each school district has a different set of priorities. We have documentation that we'll go through that helps to identify those priorities, but we can't get the full picture without the input from the community of what you feel we should be looking at and we should be addressing. So we're going to have forums like this on multiple occasions, and we've also developed a survey that will be added to the district website tomorrow, where we hope we get a lot of responses from the community. And we've asked very targeted questions that will help us to identify what we believe residents are most concerned with and what we should be focused on when moving forward, if we move forward with a capital bond. So this really is the beginning of the process. There's nothing definitive. Everything we're talking about is in the discussion phase. It's ideas. The survey will help us a great deal. There are some things we knew to include in the survey. We learned from the experience from those around us. We know the questions that we're likely to hear. So some of the survey questions we know are targeted of things we expect to hear. We expect to hear questions about synthetic turf fields for our athletic department. We expect to hear questions about air conditioning in our buildings, something that comes up all the time. And we have to decide where these items rank in priority and what the community can afford to include in the total of the capital bond, where we're making sure we address health and safety issues. We have opportunities for enhancement of our program, and we're also addressing some of the wants of our residents. So it's a balancing act, and Mrs. Laughlin is prepared to take you through some slides tonight to kind of explain the financial position of the district so you can have an understanding of why we have to limit the scope of the bond. We have no intention of taking everything we'd like to see and asking the community to support that. This is not a wish list. This is a needs list. So I think that's an important definition to make when we talk about our bond. This has been work that's been done by the Board Facilities Committee long before I arrived. This process began years ago with a building conditions survey that we'll talk a bit about. I am fortunate to be taking on the role where we're at the point where we're ready to take action in the community. But a lot of work came before that. A lot of good volunteer hours and important work was done that I had to be brought up to speed upon my arrival. I'm very happy to see that there was such a strong focus and such a clear process put in place, so I was able to pick it up and work with the community to continue it forward. So this is the first of many discussions, and once decisions are made, Mrs. Laughlin and I will be doing our roadshow, and we will have these conversations in as many forms as possible, in as many places as possible, so that not only our parents, but also our residents are very well versed in the items that we're talking about. We really do want residents to feel comfortable making an investment in the school district. What I've learned very quickly is the Elwood community is defined by the school district, and we want our buildings and grounds to be a point of pride for the community. So that said, we have just a few slides that we want to take you through to give you some of the history, some of the perspective, some of the ideas of things that we're talking about. And then we want to turn this into an open mic night for you to share with us, and we will take very copious notes of everything that you suggest so we can continue investigations based upon your input. Your input tonight will help us. The survey results will help us. We'll have additional forums to get additional input. Tonight is the beginning. But just to go a little bit, how did we get here? Every 5 years, school districts are required to do a building condition survey. The state requires us to certify the fact that our buildings are safe places for our students to attend school. And during these building condition surveys, which we must report to state ed, sometimes things are found that must be fixed immediately. And obviously we have emergency contingencies in the budget to plan for that. Some become long-term plan, and that's more of what we're talking about tonight. So in November of 2015, we did our last building condition survey with the help of our architects and engineers from BBS. Those are the district-appointed architects. They're in many, many school districts across Long Island. They have an impeccable reputation, and we did a very full vetting process before we decided that this was the firm we wanted to partner with for this project. We're very happy with the work that we've been able to accomplish with BPS. So since 2015, the Facilities Committee has been looking at this report, has been asking questions, has been evaluating it, and helping to move forward to really identify where our district priorities are. So in the timeline, the building conditions report was in November of 2015. The report to NYSCD, the New York State Education Department, was filed in January 2016. The Facilities Committee began to meet to discuss. That's still happening. As recently as last month, the last meeting, There was continued evaluation of identifying priorities within the report. And the committee is comprised of district administration, members of the Board of Education, residents, and some very knowledgeable residents. We're very fortunate that we have a number of residents who have experience in architecture, in engineering, who have volunteered their time to be part of the committee. We appreciate that. Our work with BBS continues. We're trying to figure out costs to associate with this. We don't want to speak hypothetically. When we say the high school needs a new roof, that's great. Is that a $100,000 expense? Is that $1 million expense? We need to know that. So BBS has been working with us to assign dollar figures to the areas that we're identifying as priority. Focus is on health and safety and enhancing our programs. Health and safety being the main driving factor, and I think you'll see that as the slides perform. We need, before everything else, to make sure our students, faculty, and staff are coming into buildings that are conducive to learning, health, and safety. At this point, I will turn it over to Ms. Laughlin to take us through some of the finances.
Good evening. So I'm just going to kind of go over some numbers of the past, where we've been and where we're looking to go forward with the capital bond. So since 2007, actually, we've had 3 bond votes. These were all prior to my arrival. They've all been successful votes. In January 30th, 2007, we successfully passed by almost 90% of our voters a district-wide technology install, fire alarms at Harley, and some other miscellaneous renovations that were done throughout the district in all of our buildings. In May of 2007, our $400,000 bond was passed by about 62%, and that focused more on the masonry work here at the middle school as well as at the John Glenn High School. And in December of 2010, our most recent bond was $1.4 million, passed by about 70%, and that focused on the air systems in the buildings, our sinks, the lavatories, the stages, and some other various miscellaneous renovations that we've done throughout the district altogether. Some of them focused on energy, some focused on some music room renovations in certain buildings. So it's been a widespread projects, but as you can see, those dollar values were very small. Granted, we are looking now to look at a much larger dollar value going forward. Because we're seeing high-cost repairs that are needed to be happening here in all of our buildings at this point in time, and that's to maintain the safety and the health of our students, our faculty, and staff. While we see that, we also do need some program enhancements going on in some of our classrooms, such as our science labs, our home and career rooms. So those may seem more of an educational piece, but yet they do tie also to the safety of the students as the cabinetry is deteriorating. We need to make sure that that's safe for the children to be working in. Voting on a bond is what we're looking at for 2017. The committee has been discussing this, and our goal is about the fall-winter of 2017. So it's about a year from now. I'm sorry, not a year from now. We're about 6 to 9 months from now is where we're looking at this point. The work wouldn't begin, though, until spring of 2019. And the reason being is there's a process with SED, State Education Department. Any work you do has to go through their facilities department and has to be approved by them in order to get work permits. There's about an 18-month review period for any projects out with SED right now. That window could close as they are working to hire more staff, but based on the information we have now, we're not looking that we would be doing any work within any of the buildings until spring of 2019, should we be able to stick to this timeline that we've put forward. Currently, we have just over $10 million in debt, and that's on prior bond projects. Our annual payment is about $1.6 million, and that does work into the regular general fund budget, so that is something that you see every year as a line item in our regular budget process. And most of this debt is expiring in the year 2022. So that's why we're looking at this now. Timing of this is critical. We're looking to replace old debt with new debt. We're looking to steady out the tax levy out to our taxpayers. By removing debt and then adding new debt after that expires, you're going to see some peaks and valleys within the tax levy, and we're not looking to do that. We're looking to have a minimal impact on our taxpayers in order to preserve the buildings that we have. In 2022, is when we expire, and we'll have less than $550,000 a year in debt at that point in time. So just, like I said, to stabilize this is why we're looking now at putting out a vote now for work to begin in 2019. The bond borrowing process wouldn't really occur probably till about 2022. We do what's called a BAN, a bond anticipation note, as we begin these projects, until we're finished with the project to turn it into a full bond. So you're paying just interest first, and then you start picking up bond payments when you actually convert that BAN into a bond. At this time, we have not calculated what the tax impact would be on the projects that we're proposing. We're working on that with our fiscal advisors, as well as our bond counsel. So those numbers vary based on the state rates that are out there, the averages. So we're working on finalizing that list, getting an accurate cost of what we'd be proposing out, then working with bond counsel and the fiscal advisors to get a true bond amount. We then convert that to the interest payments based on SCD, building aid. There's a whole big calculation that goes into this. In May, when we prepare to present to the Board of Education, we intend to have some estimates of what the tax impact would be for the community at that point in time. So the building condition survey overall, total expenditures just over $43 million worth of repairs and enhancements to our buildings. That's for all 4 buildings. We do have a list of high priority, high ticket items, the roofs being the main item for all 4 buildings. The proposed bond that we're looking at is anywhere from $25 million to $30 million. That's the range that the Facilities Committee is looking at. And that's, again, to address the major health and safety items, along with a few educational enhancements in there. And in addition, we have an energy performance contract that the board approved back in 2014-15, and we're looking to run that contract in conjunction with the bond work. So some items that are in that building condition survey report are able to actually be picked up through an energy performance contract. The energy performance contract doesn't cost the district any money. The work that gets done for that, you see in savings in your utilities. And if you don't see that savings, the vendor that has provided the work must pay the district the money that was missed in savings. So it's a net effect on the budget, but it's critical for us to make sure we time the EPC with the bond so that we can maximize our dollars and the money that we can get going forward to improve our facilities. Dr. Dawson?
I'm going to re-emphasize a point that Carrie just made because I think it's important for the community to understand. Over the next several weeks and months, you're going to see some construction taking place on campus, and you're going to see some enhancements take place within our facilities. We are right now experiencing some benefit of an energy performance contract that allows us to make some modifications to the buildings. We have been given some grant monies that help us to make some repairs to the facilities. And we also have received, through SMART bond initiatives, some finances that help us to upgrade our technologies. So you're going to see some things happening in the schools that I don't want the community to confuse with the proposal for the capital bond. This is money we've already received, projects that have already been approved, and will already be taking place outside of this discussion. That's good, because it allowed us to check some boxes off of the building condition survey of work that we can get done without asking for additional financing from the community to support. So when you're in the buildings and you start to see some things happening, you say, well, that seems premature. Not associated with what we're talking about tonight. The types of things that we are talking about tonight, they're not glamorous, but they're very necessary. These are those health and safety items. These are those things that we need to do to be able to make sure that our children and our staff are in a safe and healthy environment. So when we're talking about replacing the roofs at each building with an approximated expense of $11 million, it's a need. It's not a want. It's something that has to be done. It would have been wonderful to put in a cyclical replacement for all of our roofs so they weren't all due at the same time to the tune of $11 million. Again, the tight finances of the budget and having that levy cap in place doesn't allow us to say, okay, this is the year we replace the Harley roof, this is the year we replace the Boyd roof. So unfortunately, they were all due at the same time. Our staff has done a great job doing the best they can to repair and patch and keep the water out of the buildings to the best extent possible. But to be candid, we also have areas in each of our buildings that we just don't use because of the frequency of leaks. There are banks of lockers in this building that we don't assign to children because we know when it rains, they're going to get wet. And that's not acceptable to the Elwood community. So that is a big ticket item and a large driving expense. We're looking at sidewalk repair and replacement. Concrete gets old, it cracks as the weather changes, cold days, hot days. I'm sure as you approach this building, you notice some of those are repairs that need to be made. So district-wide, we're looking at over $1 million in replacement of repair of sidewalk replacement. Vinyl tile replacement, that's our flooring. There's a very specific reason why that needs to be done. We didn't put it in the PowerPoint. It's asbestos tile. And asbestos is not dangerous to people unless it's disturbed. But you don't want it in your building. It's an antiquated substance that needs to be removed. The act of removing it, which is called abatement, is very expensive. So that's why that has such a big ticket. Asbestos is not dangerous unless it's disturbed. It's okay to have asbestos under your tile floor until you're ripping up the tile floor. So it becomes a very expensive proposition to replace the flooring. If you're a person, you're a homeowner, you say, it must be $300 to replace my kitchen floor. Yeah, you probably weren't dealing with asbestos abatement when you did that. Because that was a very common used materials in buildings that were built in the ages that our school buildings are, a lot of the associated expense with the projects that we need to do involve an asbestos abatement before the project can be done. Our floors are part of that. Looking further down, the abating of pipe tunnels district-wide. We need to get the asbestos out of the buildings. And if we do that, and it is an expensive initiative, we'll be able to do a lot more of our repairs internally because our own trained, skilled laborers that we have work here with backgrounds as electricians, backgrounds as plumbers, backgrounds as masons, they'll be able to do the work on their own because they won't need to work the asbestos piece, the abatement piece in order to get the job done. So that's a big ticket item listed here. Miscellaneous upgrades, there's a lot of things on that list. Some of it is HVAC, which is heating and ventilation systems. Again, not glamorous, but necessary. Right now, our buildings have 2 heat settings, on and off. We'd really like to improve upon that. I'm sure those of you with children in the buildings have probably come home and talked about that situation. When it gets very hot in the classroom, because the heat is working very nicely, the solution is to open the window. Not the best place to be, so we would like to make some adjustments to that to help us out. Things like septic repair. We have a condition at John Glenn High School where sometimes if there is too much rainwater and too much bathroom activity, we have a problem. We want to make sure we can correct that moving forward. That's some of the parts of the miscellaneous. Some doors, some windows, things along those lines. $1 million doesn't go as far as you would think. ADA compliance, that's the American with Disabilities Act. There are some handicapped accessible situations that are regulation now that weren't regulation when the building was built, but it's time to get into compliance. Some of the stalls in the bathroom, some of the nurse's office bathrooms aren't wheelchair accessible. We have an older fire alarm system. I think if you've been to a modern building, you've probably seen that along with the alarms, you'll see flashing lights for hearing impaired individuals. We need to start moving our fire alarm system in that direction to make sure we're complying with all of our students and staff. And then additional items to be reviewed. We know this is an incomplete list. We haven't heard from you yet. We don't have the survey results yet. I fully expect that meetings like this and the results of the survey will identify priorities that we didn't hear. Please also know that Mrs. Laughlin and I will be giving this same presentation to each of the 4 building faculties during the month of April. They've sacrificed their faculty meeting time to talk about this initiative and talk about the budget. And we want to hear from our teachers and staff, and certainly the building administrators, to say, you're in the classrooms every day. You're walking the halls every day. Although we feel our building condition survey was very thorough, what may we have missed? So the same as we're soliciting input from the community, we're soliciting input from the faculty and staff as well. Yeah. So the educational enhancements. These are second-tier priorities. They don't speak to health and safety, but boy, would they improve the program that we're able to offer to our students, so they become very attractive. Auditorium renovations in this middle school and at the high school. The high school's in better shape than the middle school. For those of you that saw Greece over the weekend, you saw we have a very nice facility for our students, but there are some upgrades that need to be done there. One of them is the high school doesn't have any large group air-conditioned space. Most buildings have at least one place where you can bring the students on an oppressive day to cool down. A facility that's comfortable for the community, for a graduation ceremony, for an awards assembly during those September and June events. So we're looking to add that to the high school. We want to do some things with sound and lights. We might be able to do that. Here, when you look around, it's some more greater needs. These are the original chairs. This may be the original carpet. There are some more aesthetic repairs that we feel might be beneficial in this building, in addition to lighting and sound and things of that nature. So if we are successful in including this in the bond, I think you would see a very nice facelift within this facility, which is our central meeting place for the entire district. So I think it might be something worth investing in. Science labs. That's at the high school. For the type of experiments and labs our students are currently conducting, the materials that we have available to them are not as state-of-the-art as they should be for the level of instruction that's taking place, so we're looking at our science labs. For any of you that have taken the adult ed courses within the family and consumer science classrooms, the kitchens in this building in the high school, when I go there to visit, I feel like I'm visiting the set of the Brady Bunch. That's what the kitchens look like. They are out of date. They are in need of repair. They are in need of replacement. So they are on our list that will not only enhance our instructional program, but also benefit the community because of all the events that we do use those facilities for. The middle school music suite, that was an area that unfortunately sustained some damage due to roof leaks ahead. So that room needs kind of a major facelift to make sure that that damage is completely renovated. So that's on our priority list. The wood shop at the high school, again, we need to update it to 2017 needs. A lot of materials continue to be used, but there's a lot of more modern pieces that are not present that we feel would benefit our instructional program. For those of you who have visited the high school gymnasium, you probably noticed that the wood floor is no longer John Glenn blue, it's Ford Novo green, which I find offensive. That's because of the layers and layers of wax that have gone over the floor. The floor needs to be replaced. It's been too great a period of time, and the custodial staff has done a wonderful job preserving it as much as they possibly can. But that's a floor that needs to be completely ripped up and replaced. So that has made our list. The John Glenn Guidance Suite, we've done some work. We received a grant from Senator Marcelino's office that allowed us to do some things this year. So there's already some restructuring that's taking place there. But to complete that project, we really want that to be a college and career counseling center. And we want to make it a place where students and parents feel comfortable going to be able to have confidential conversations, private meetings, group sessions could be held. It's not structured that way right now. So we want to make some changes to that room. All the cafeterias, you've been in them. They're dated. They need a facelift. That is not major work. That is ceiling tiles, that's floors, that's the furniture within them. It's an aesthetics piece, and I think a necessary one. Tennis courts. For any of you that have played on our tennis courts, they're becoming a safety issue. The tennis courts are cracked, they're in disrepair. It's almost at a point where we don't feel comfortable hosting home matches. Not only is it not a point of pride to bring visitors to our tennis courts, it becomes a safety issue for our athletes. Having played high school tennis, I would have found it very difficult to play competitively on these courts. So if we are going to continue a tennis program, this is something we need to invest some money in. And what else? What you tell us is what else. We want to know what other priorities we should be focused on. We want to hear from you. The survey will open tomorrow. I will thank our friends from Syntax. Beth Izzo is one of the representatives of Syntax. Syntax is our PR firm. They do a lot of work for us. They help to develop and manage our website. They're responsible to make sure those stories that you read are always up to date and topical, to make sure all the information you need is being pushed out. The postcard you received that invited you tonight was created by Syntax, And the survey that you'll receive tomorrow is something we worked in conjunction with Syntax to create. You'll find it's going to be very thorough. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions, but it'll take about 5 minutes to complete. And it'll give you some open narrative space to lend your opinion of what you feel priorities are, whether you feel our focus is in the right direction, or if there are any grand omissions that we really should investigate. We're going to open tomorrow. We're going to keep it open to April 14th. I will send reminders out to the community asking them to participate, and then all those results will be carefully examined by both the Board Facilities Committee and the administration to see what people have to say. And we will have future forums to re-engage these conversations. So as far as future meetings, if you want to attend all facilities meetings, while it's an appointed group and chaired by our 2 board members that are here this evening, Mr. Tomio and Mrs. Weiss, it's a meeting open to the public. If you were not appointed to the committee as an official member, all the meetings are open to the public. You're welcome to attend any or all of them and become part of that dialogue. So the next is on April 20th. It's held at 6 p.m. in the district office conference rooms right at the end of this hallway. The following will be on May 3rd, and we're hoping that by the board meeting on May 18th, we've gathered enough information, we have enough data, we have a better view of the finances surrounding this, that we'll be able to make a presentation to the board of, here's where we are. And if we're able to do that, we're confident that the timeline that's been established will allow us to hold a vote, to ask the community yes or no, to have a definitive dollar figure by the fall or early winter. Districts have to think about when to hold a bond vote. Most of those who are experts in the field will tell you to keep it separate from your budget vote. You don't want residents to get confused what they're voting about. So you typically will remove it from your budget vote. So we wouldn't want to hold it in June or May when our budget vote is. But having it in the fall, October, November, is typically advisable. But of course, if we don't get to that point in the timeline, we're not confident and have a definitive answer, we have no problem moving into January, February. Northport held theirs in February, passed with flying colors. But we also like to learn from those around us. So we will add dates as needed. Now, before we go to open mic and ask you for your input and your ideas, are there any questions about anything that I presented? And I will ask you to use the microphone because although we will be able to hear you very clearly, those watching from home and when they rewatch the video won't be without a microphone. Pete, do we have the wireless or we're going to ask them? Yes, we do have a board meeting in 55. Agami, do you mind coming up to the mic?
The list looks wonderful. I'm in full support of all of it. It occurred to me yesterday when I was at Boyd, is there any way to fix the goose poop? It's a serious health issue. I know it's funny, but when I was up taking pictures for the yearbook at recess, the back fields are covered, and it was being tracked into the school, and I keep thinking about toxins, and it's poop, and it's
I'm happy to answer your question.
And everything else looks perfect. I love it. Thank you so much for doing all this work. This is the only thing I have to add.
I'm happy to answer your question, and thank you for asking. It's a little outside of this discussion, but Mr. McDonald, as our Director of Facilities, will nod in agreement that you have just touched upon the Superintendent of Schools' biggest pet peeve. I am at war with the geese. If you have driven through this campus recently, you have probably noticed the inflatable warthogs that were purchased, and they're not inexpensive, to scare away the geese population. We found them to be very effective for about a week. The geese saw them, were frightened, took off in the other direction, and kind of eased their way back in and realized that's no threat, that's an inflatable thing. We are searching for better ways to combat the geese. And what do different districts do? Mr. McDonald has explored a product that we will begin to apply in the spring that they find to be very offensive. To people, it smells like grape juice. To geese, it's offensive. So we're going to spread it in the areas of the fields that we know they tend to populate, but I will share with all of you, they're just going to move to another location. And we don't have the manpower, the resources, or the finances to spread the grape juice on every inch of district property. So what we're going to try to do is eliminate the geese population from the high traffic areas, but I would be disingenuous if I told you we can keep them off of district property entirely. But the custodial staff and the buildings and grounds staff is well aware that we want to try to shoo them away as much as possible, and certainly make sure that any of the fecal matter that's left behind is cleaned up to the best extent possible. The only other strategy that some districts use is they call them dogs. And they bring collies, and the collies chase them off, but it's the same thing. If you don't bring the collies every day, the geese, they're smart, and they come back when they know the dogs aren't present. So no one has yet found a permanent solution to the geese population. I may or may not have threatened to bring firearms onto district property. Mr. McDonald counseled me against that, which was nice, but we are in full agreement that we are trying to address the problem as best as possible. Other questions about what was presented before input that you'd like to share? Okay, then let's move to phase 2. If you'd like to come to the microphone and offer a suggestion, we're taking copious notes and we'd love to hear from you.
So,
Come on.
in the last session, just one question. You mentioned that there's a $43 million worth of projects, and you're proposing a $30 million bond.
What is the reason for that? We want to make sure that when we do come forward with a bond proposal, we want to do it with the smallest tax impact on the community. And because of the debt that's expiring, in working with the Facilities Committee, the Board, and the Finance Committee, we think the range that we can propose to the community of about $25 to $30 million will have a minimal impact on the current taxes that we're collecting. If we were to go to the full extent of $43 million, our residents may see more of a profound impact on their local taxes that they're paying.
I'm not trying to push for a high bond. I was just wondering what makes up this extra $13 million that seems to be dispensed?
Things that would be nice to have, things that would certainly be welcome, but we didn't identify as priorities.
Okay.
If we find through feedback that we get from residents and we get through the survey that folks are interested in more of those items that we kind of crossed off the list, and the board feels comfortable going out at higher than 25 to 30 million and explaining to the community what investment would need to be made, we'll do it. I'm not sure I expect to hear that, but if we do, we certainly have the capacity to do it. I can't believe that we were that successful. Yes, sir.
How many buildings do we have?
We have 4 school buildings. 4. We have two elementary schools. We have Harley Primary School, which is a K-2 building. We have Boyd Intermediate, which is a 3 to 5 building. This middle school is grades 6 through 8, and John Glenn High School is 9 through 12.
I think that the $11 million for 4 buildings is a little bit, you should do shopping.
Yeah, BBS does that for us.
No, I think it's too much money for that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, one more thing. How much would it raise our taxes?
Well, that's kind of speaking to the question that the last gentleman raised. What we're trying to do is identify a total dollar value that would have a very minimal impact. And he asked the question, why, if the condition survey said 43, why did we reduce it from 25 to 30? It's because we don't want your taxes to have a big increase.
I'd like to know how much, you know.
Yeah, I'll be able to get you that answer a few months.
You know.
100%. I'll be able to get you that answer down the line, but we don't want to give a fabricated number now. We don't know what the final total that is that we're looking to approve, and because there's such a wide discrepancy in what homeowners pay in this community for taxes, we really want to have a better sense of what our final number is before we ask Ms. Oxlund to make projections. If your taxes are currently X, they'll go to Y. But that is a number we will absolutely provide when we have a more definitive project.
With regards to the 11 million for the 4 buildings and roofs, it's important to keep in mind with all of these numbers that we'll start putting out, and I know we only put out a few numbers today, the educational enhancements, we do have numbers for that. We're continuing to tweak those numbers as we finalize this list and as we go forward. These are estimates, so that's why we use BBS as architects, engineers, because they're doing these projects all over the state. They're all over the place. So it's based on their experience of what they're seeing take place, based on the material costs, the economy, the workloads that vendors are having. So it's just an estimate that we're using at this point. However, we fully anticipate when we bid out the project, which is a process we have to go through for any of the work that we're doing, it would go through a formal bidding process, and that's a sealed bid. There's a certain timeline for vendors to apply for that bid. It's sealed and it's opened all at the same time, and the award goes to the lowest bidder. So while we may be estimating on a high end of $11 million, the bids could come in, say, $8 or $9 million. That would provide for us some savings within our bond proposal that we could possibly use for other things. So what the Facilities Committee has been talking about, and we've talked with BBS and with Bond Council, is creating an A list and a B list. So right now you're seeing an A list. We're waiting to hear back from the community within the next month on what else should maybe be on that A list, and even maybe take some things and say, you know what, maybe they should be on a B list, so that when we start realizing savings of the original bond estimates, we can start going into those items that are on that B list. So these aren't guaranteed, this is what it's going to cost us. It's a high-end estimate in order to provide us that flexibility when we go out for bid, because we don't know what the cost would be until we actually go through that process. So I hope that makes it a little bit clearer to everyone, and as we go through the process, these are estimates based on real-time costs that BBS is realizing in other districts. There's a lot of factors that come into play, especially at the bidding point. And conversations we've had at Facilities Committee, when you bid the work is key. So BBS is aware, along with other vendors, when are they seeing slow times? So it's at those slow times that you want to try to get your bids out, because their numbers are going to come in lower because they need the work. So we're aware of these things. We're going to be working closely with the architects and with many other people and regular council, bond council, in order to make sure that we maximize the dollars that the taxpayers are putting forward for us. With regards to the estimate on the taxpayer, it is our full intent to inform everybody what the potential impact would be. Once we start finalizing what the actual bond vote would entail, that's when we'll start getting those numbers to you. So within the next month, month and a half is when we're going to start calculating those numbers out along with bond counsel and our financial advisors in order to get the best estimate we can. So that's why in May, our goal is for the May 18th board meeting to have a presentation and have that information readily available. If you can't make that meeting, please know they are live streamed. If you mark it on your calendar now, it is live streamed if you can't make it, and it is recorded so that you can view it at a later date. But we fully intend to inform what a potential tax impact would be on the taxpayers. And our goal as a facilities committee, as administration, and I know as the board, is to keep that as minimal as possible. So I hope that answers some of your questions a little bit more. So what Fred is saying is that the numbers, the $11 million, is loaded with everything. It's got contingencies in there, prevailing wage. So there's a lot of things that go into this process. It's not just say, hey, let's do 4 roofs and it's $11 million. Let's do sinks and it's going to be $300,000. There's a formula that they use in order to derive these numbers. So we make sure we're covering ourselves for everything with the intent that the bid is going to come in lower and provide for some savings, because some projects may come in higher depending on the time of the year that we're bidding in.
And I always like to be fully transparent with the community, so I don't mind sharing. We would much rather tell you a higher number and come in lower, rather than telling you a lower number and going over budget. I think that's a better way to do business. And just to reiterate the point, we want to make sure that at the end of the process, we're able to present a bond that meets the needs of the district and community without having a substantial impact to the taxpayer. Which is why we didn't say, okay, the building condition survey, identified $43 million. Let's ask the community for $43 million. We want to align new debt with expiring debt so that as a homeowner, you don't see sharp increases to your current taxes. We know that's important. We know that every dollar counts in every household. So we wanted to make sure that when we are able to propose funds, if we do finally do that, we can have a conversation that will be affordable in your home. Other input you'd like to offer? It is. Come on down.
Hi, and as far as the tennis courts, they are certainly far beyond playable condition at this point. The USTA used to have a program, I think it's still in place, where they will kind of match funds and work with the community to improve the tennis courts, so that might be a way to defray that cost.
Perfect.
I might have a contact at the USTA Facilities Committee, so try and pass them
You're
information.
all ears. Thank you.
And then a couple other questions, and I guess following along with the tennis courts, we do have a new neighbor that will be building next to our school
I
site.
heard.
Whose residents might use our tennis courts on the weekends or whatever, so that might be another place to reach out and see if they might be able to help defray a cost of any recreational facilities.
Well, they'll have their own. They'll have their own, as well as a pool and lots of things that we might use.
Well, and that might be because we have middle school and high school tennis teams, so, it's not, so we have that adjoining area with Elwood Park too, so there might be some creativity there.
Yep.
So a general question, how much, if any of this is state building aidable? And then, I knew I was gonna forget the, well, my final thought was coordinating any construction we do, again, with the huge construction project that'll be going on next door as well. Oh, I know what the other thing is. On the district website, there's a report from November on the water issue with the lead in the water. What's the status of that? Because that report from November still had a lot of non-drinkable water sources in our buildings. So has that all been abated, or will that be part of this?
I'll answer that question first. I'm sure that all the residents here are familiar with the fact that many school districts in Suffolk County and throughout the state experience an issue where they've had to do testing of all water drinking sources for lead contamination. The EPA and Suffolk County have kind of designated a safe level of lead that can be present in water, and that there's some debate about what parts per billion of lead are safe for drinking. So school districts across the island and across the state had to test every water source and identify those that were safe for drinking and those that were not. What we did in the Elwood School District is we made sure that there were ample drinking sources in every building that were indicated as such. We went as far as purchasing bottle filling stations, which is an upscale water fountain where you can both fill a water bottle or take a drink from, and made sure that all of our buildings had access to water bottle filling stations. The areas where we found water to be tested that is not potable for drinking, places in bathrooms, places in science labs, they've been labeled as such, and there is no health risk to washing your hands in water that has parts per billion above the recommended level of lead. There is no harm in using water in a science lab to conduct an experiment that is parts per billion above lead. It is not part of the capital bond to completely correct that issue. It isn't. If we were to gut all of our buildings and replace all of the lead piping that is within the deep infrastructure of the building, we'd be talking about a bond that far exceeds $25 to $30 million. It's just not a feasible project. We feel we have appropriately addressed the circumstance by making sure there are ample, tested, safe water sources. All of our kitchens, all of our student water fountains that we've maintained, the new water fountains that we've purchased, and all the other areas that we need clean drinking water. Those that are not have been clearly labeled as not, and staff, faculty, and students clearly know where to go for a drink and water that is safe for other purposes. That is the way that most, if not all, school districts have addressed this problem, because the millions of dollars that would be required to replace the inner workings of all of our plumbing systems completely to the water source would not be a fair burden to ask the taxpayers to take on. So I hope that answers that question.
In addition, I know November is the recent report, the most recent report that's up on the website. Mr. McDonald and I just recently had the conversation about that. We do have some locations that we feel we were able to fix because the actual lead source was in the spout itself. So replacing some of those parts could potentially just fix the issue. We're working with J.C. Broderick, who is the environmental company that we use for the testing, to get back in here and do sampling of those repairs that we've made to make sure that those are clear so we can turn those fountains back on. But at this time, anything that was deemed unsafe at that point and has not been corrected and retested is still labeled or shut off for not for drinking. So it's important to understand that there's 2 companies out there that do all of this for all of Suffolk County, Nassau County. So it's very hard to get them scheduled to get in to get this done as quickly as we would like. We were one of the first districts to get on top of this back last year, and as soon as it happened out in Flint, Mr. Scordo called Mr. McDonald and I in the office and said, get them in here and start testing us before even it became a regulation. So we were fortunate enough to be ahead of the game, but because we were ahead of the game, now our retesting gets delayed because a lot of other districts had to get their original tests and that stuff work done. So we're in the process of still doing some of those repairs, getting the retest done, and when we have those, as we receive up-to-date reports, we will be most certainly posting them up on the website as we're required to do by Department of Health regulations. So, continue to check out the website. As we receive updated reports, we'll continue to post that information for the public to see. Building it. We've not yet gone through the definitives of what is aidable and what is not. That's something we're going to have to work with BBS, bond council, fiscal advisors, SCD to determine which projects are and which projects are not. Our goal is to maximize the building aid, and so that all know, you do receive a portion of aid on your projects. Our aid ranges from 55 to 65%. There's an extra 10% incentive in there, so it's making sure that we maximize our aid on all our projects. Any projects you do outdoors at any particular time has to be tied to a project doing indoors. So we wouldn't be doing, let's say, the tennis courts all by themselves. We would maybe be doing the tennis courts in conjunction with repairing family and consumer science rooms. That way we can get the aid on the tennis courts as well. If we were to just do tennis courts alone under one particular project with SCD, we would never receive aid on that, and that would, I think, be foolish of the district to do that, because we want to make sure we minimize the impact to the taxpayers and maximize our money we're going to get back from the state. So again, those numbers are forthcoming as we finalize this list, as we make sure we're going to maximize it to the best ability that we can, and that information will most certainly be provided to the community as we move forward.
Hi, I just have a quick question. You're asking for a 25 to 30 million proposed bond, potentially, and if you add this, it's 16 and change. So you're saying all the educational stuff, you're gonna need between 10 and 15. Can you clarify that a little bit more?
Yes, it's an open-ended number. We wanted to make sure we left flexibility for priorities that may be identified by the residents, by the staff, by the community, that we didn't include in this list. So we are trying to make sure we have level A priorities, level B priorities, level C priorities, and see how many of those things we can accomplish within that $25 to $30 million range. So if you simply do the math of the things we presented tonight, you won't get that number.
Okay.
Leaving flexibility. Thank you.
I'll face you guys, my face is better than my backside. Being a co-chair on the facilities committee with Ms. Weiss, just want everyone to know the committee itself has worked diligently. We we had the gamut. It wasn't just, focused about the football team or high school sports or Harley Avenue. We're trying to really cover the gamut, and I think this forum is a great opportunity for everyone to give input. Everyone represents a different building, a different age group, a different segment of the community. I think some of the things maybe that haven't been spoken about is improvements inside, the music rooms. There's other things that we're not just focusing on curriculum, we're worried about the arts as well as the sports, as well as the building and the safety. The initial, when I first got on last year on the facilities committee, it was safety. And I think we've done a great job as far as the building itself, making sure our buildings are going to be secured, safe, operable. And I think this is a great opportunity and a forum for the community to get together, give some ideas this evening. We're here to open. I think a lot of the community members that are here tonight are also part of the facilities committee. We've all come up with some ideas, we've helped put something together, but there's a lot of you that weren't part of the discussion, so this is a great event tonight to give some input. So I know the microphone's a little scary, but don't be afraid, come on up and let us know your feelings so we know as far as a committee and the school district itself, what we're looking at. What should we be doing to appease the community and make sure everyone's represented? So, thank you. Now you're all starting to come on. Look at this.
Or you needed James to invite you over. I understand.
I just had a question because on facilities committee, one of the things that came up was a proposal to change the security in the front of the buildings, and it almost made it seem like, a bulletproof glass, and I was very opposed to that, having elementary kids, so I just wanted to ask if that's still in the cards.
No. And what you might see as enhancements to the entries are actually something that we're trying to accomplish through the energy performance contract. And what that would do is create a vestibule in each of our entryways where you come in from the outer doors, and then there's an inner set of doors that you would reach before you could reach the building. Mr. McDonald was very creative in his presentation on the energy performance contract to talk about the positive impact that would have on insulating the building, keeping the cold air out and the hot air in. So it's not part of this discussion, it's part of that discussion. We're hoping to achieve it because that would enable people to come in the building, but to be in the vestibule so they can be in the building, state the reason for their being there before we admit them entrance. Are we looking to put guard towers in there and have people sitting behind windows? Absolutely not. I'm not sure how that conversation started, but I hope to put it to rest. Our current system of having guards at the front desk and greeters at the front desk that we currently have, we're not looking to change, but we are looking to add an additional layer of security as far as an extra set of doors as part of the energy performance contract, not part of this discussion.
I have a question about roof repairs.
Yes.
Is there any chance to have solar energy panels on top of that, recoup costs or defray costs in any way with the energy contracts?
Yep, it's something we're investigating. Our rules right now are not necessarily most conducive to adding solar power, but it's something that we're absolutely investigating, and if we find that we can offset the cost of repairing the roof and regain some revenue by adding solar power, we will do that. Yes, we're investigating solar panels. Yes, ma'am.
Just briefly, I think solar panels are a great idea. In case we can't do it, have we ever thought about having slanted roofs so the water doesn't just pool continuously?
Not the first person to ask me that question. I leave that to the engineers and the architects to investigate. I certainly don't claim to be a drainage expert, but I would hope that the roof design that is used is one that is most conducive to the long-term benefit of the building. We have a Board of Education meeting budget workshop starting at 7:30. We're going to change locations and move up to the library. Ms. Loughlin will be giving a presentation on where we are in our current budget development. The CFBAC will be conducting to ask questions and examine our progress. We also have a presentation by Intralogic Solutions. They're a vendor we're working with for the smart bond money. They're going to be talking about enhancements that are being made currently to some of our technology pieces, some video cameras, some telephones, and things of that nature, which again is outside of this work. You are welcome to attend that meeting at 7:30. We're just going to shift up to the library. Are there any other questions before we break for the evening?
Before we break as well, I just want to remind everybody that the survey will be up on the front page of the district's website starting at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. It will be open through April 14th. I encourage you that are here to take that survey. Tell your neighbor, tell your friends. It is not open just to family members of students that are here in the district, but it's open to the entire community. We're going to, as Dr. Bossert said, be visiting all the buildings and talking to staff. We want to hear from them as well. So please, I encourage you to go on, take the survey. It will not take more than 5 minutes of your time. There's about 10 questions or so. There are some additional commentary boxes there for you to add. If you didn't feel comfortable speaking tonight, please email myself, Dr. Bossert, Mr. McDonald, on any concerns or thoughts, ideas you may have for the bond. I ask you to please take that survey. Facilities Committee will be meeting in April to take a look at the results of it and compile this list to be a little bit more in depth so we can keep moving forward and stay on task with this project. So please tell your neighbors. It's going to be up on the front page of the district's website, and it will be open up for a month.
Thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it. Except for you, Matt Weiss.